A millionaire invites his ex-girlfriend to his wedding so he can watch her suffer, but then she arrives with 3 children who look exactly like him. Everyone present was left speechless, not understanding anything. Rodolfo was looking at the panoramic view of his luxurious apartment in Manhattan with a glass of wine in his hands and a distant look in his eyes. The invitation was already ready. An elegant envelope, sealed with golden wax, carrying the invitation to the most anticipated event of the year, his wedding to Daisy. He slid his fingers over the paper, thinking for a moment before handing it to his assistant. "Make sure Jasmine receives this in person," he ordered, his voice firm but filled with something indefinable. The assistant hesitated for a second. "Are you sure, sir? I mean, considering your past." Rodolfo looked up, his expression becoming cold. "Yes, she needs to see what she missed." The truth was that no one, not even Daisy, knew the full story between him and Jasmine. In the past, they were more than just boyfriends. They were lovers, accomplices, dreamers. But everything changed when he decided to follow a different path, abandoning her without explanation, leaving behind a love that seemed unshakable. Now, about to marry Daisy, a sophisticated and perfect woman in the eyes of society, he felt an inexplicable need to bring Jasmine back, even if only to see her react. Maybe it was pride, maybe a hidden need to prove to himself that he had made the right decision. As the invitation left for Los Angeles, where Jasmine now lived, Rodolfo took a deep breath. He was sure that this woman no longer meant anything to him, or at least that was what he tried to convince himself. Jasmine held the invitation between her fingers, looking at those words with a mixture of surprise and indignation. Rodolfo, after so many years without any contact, he was now inviting her to his wedding. The irony was cruel. She took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotions that were bubbling up inside her. Her eyes drifted to the 3 little ones playing on the living room rug. Tomas, Matthias and Leonardo, with their innocent smiles and boundless energy, were the reason she never let herself fall apart. Each of them bore striking traits of their father, from their intense eyes to the way they frowned when concentrating on something. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Matthias asked, noticing her expression. She smiled, kneeling down in front of her children. "I am, my love. We're going on a trip." The 3 of them's eyes lit up. "Where to?" Tomas asked excitedly. Jasmine hesitated for a moment. "To New York." She had made up her mind. She would no longer run away from the past. Did Rodolfo want her to see what she had lost? Well, he would see what had really happened. She would face this marriage not as a humiliated woman, but as the mother of the 3 children he never knew he had. With determination, she began to pack her bags. She chose elegant clothes for the children, something that would highlight her presence. No sloppiness or insecurity. This time, she would enter Rodolfo's world not as a memory of the past, but as a truth that could not be ignored. Daisy was adjusting her earrings in front of the mirror when she noticed Rodolfo distracted, twirling a glass of whiskey between his fingers. He seemed distant, thoughtful, something rare for him. "You've been different since yesterday," she commented, closing the clasp of her bracelet. "Did something happen?" Rodolfo looked up and forced a smile. "Nothing much. I'm just sorting out the last details of the wedding." She studied him for a moment. She knew the man well. She knew when he was hiding something. Then she approached him and slid her hands over his shoulders, trying to appear casual. "What about this Jasmine? I saw her name on the guest list. I've never heard you mention her before." Rodolfo's grip on his glass tightened for a split second, but he quickly regained his neutral expression. "She was a business acquaintance, nothing important." Daisy arched an eyebrow. "Really? Because from the tone of the invitation, it seems like you two have a past." He let out a brief laugh, as if the idea were absurd. "Daisy, do you really think I would invite an ex to our wedding?" She kept her gaze fixed on him for a few seconds before looking away. Something inside her told her it wasn't that simple. But Daisy was not a woman to create scandals without proof. She just smiled and walked away. "If you say so," she muttered, picking up her purse. But as she left the room, her eyes held a glint of suspicion. Something was wrong, and she would find out what it was. Don Esteban watched his son with the stern eyes of a man who had seen a lot in his life. He sat in his leather chair in his office, the room lit only by the yellow light of the lamp. Rodolfo, standing in front of him, maintained his posture firm, but there was a silent tension between them. Them. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" His father's grave tone betrayed his disapproval. "Inviting Jasmine to the wedding? That's a terrible idea." Rodolfo let out an impatient sigh, pouring himself another glass of whiskey. "Dad, don't start that. She doesn't mean anything to me anymore." Don Esteban crossed his arms, studying his son. "If it were true, you wouldn't need to prove it." Rodolfo gave a half-smile, a little arrogant. "I want her to see what she lost. I want her to see that I've moved on, that my life is better without her." His father shook his head slowly. "You're playing with fire. Jasmine is not just any woman. You don't know how she'll react." Rodolfo raised his glass in a sarcastic toast. "Let her react however she wants. It doesn't change anything." Don Esteban sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I just hope you don't regret it." But Rodolfo showed. No doubt, he was convinced that he had control of the situation. Little did he know that in a few days his life would be turned upside down. The plane landed smoothly at the airport, and Jasmine felt her heart race. She had spent years avoiding this moment, but now she was here, with no turning back. She looked at the three boys beside her, impeccably dressed in suits that highlighted their striking features. Tomás, Matias, and Leonardo were the perfect image of a true Delgado, and Jasmine knew that when she saw them, Rodolfo would no longer be able to run away from the truth. As they waited for clearance to disembark, Tomás swung his legs impatiently. "New York is huge, Mom. Have you ever lived here before?" "I did, but it was a long time ago," Jasmine replied, adjusting the collar of Matias's suit jacket. "So you know the groom from the party?" Leonardo asked curiously. Jasmine hesitated for a moment. She wanted to choose her words carefully. "Yes, he was someone important to me in the past." Matias frowned. "And now he's married someone else." She forced a smile. Exactly. The boys had no idea of the twist that was about to happen. Jasmine had tried to hide as much as she could about Rodolfo, but now everything would be different. The truth that had been buried years ago would finally come to light, and he would no longer be able to ignore it. As soon as they disembarked, Jasmine held her son's hands and walked through the terminal. People's attentive eyes turned to them. The boys drew attention to their elegance, and more than that, to their striking resemblance to each other. The driver who was waiting for her opened the limousine door while she helped the children get in. Their destination, the luxurious hotel where they would stay until the wedding. Jasmine took a deep breath as she settled into the leather seat. For years, she had had to bear the consequences of a past love alone. She had had to be strong when no one else was by her side. But now everything would change. Rodolfo wanted to show her off, like a forgotten memory. He wanted to show her what she had lost. What he didn't know was that he wouldn't be the only one to surprise everyone that night. The reception hall was impeccable. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, illuminating the tables adorned with floral arrangements and silver cutlery. The guests were already seated, chatting animatedly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Rodolfo, wearing a tailored suit, maintained a haughty look. For him, that day represented the consecration of his new life with Daisy. However, His confidence wavered the moment Jasmine entered the hall. Her heels echoed softly on the marble floor. As she walked with firm posture, she wore an elegant, discreet yet sophisticated dress, and by her side the three boys. Small, dressed in impeccable suits and walking hand in hand, they made an impressive image. The murmur among the guests began immediately. "My God, who are those children?" whispered one of the high society women. They look just like Rodolfo," another guest commented, his eyes widening. Daisy, standing next to the altar, noticed the movement and her body tensed. As she followed the others' gaze, she saw Jasmine, and especially the three children beside her. Her breath caught. Rodolfo, who had been talking to one of the groomsmen until then, turned to see what was causing such a commotion. As soon as his eyes fell on the boys, his expression changed. The color drained from his face. It was like looking at three versions of himself as a child. The same face shape, the same deep brown eyes, the same confident posture, despite his young age. Daisy felt her chest tighten. It wasn't possible. The whispers grew louder by the second. Could they be his children? With each step Jasmine took through the room, the buzz intensified. Everyone was shocked. Rodolfo remained paralyzed, unable to look away. Daisy, now in absolute shock, looked at him for an explanation. But Rodolfo couldn't speak. At that moment, his past had just knocked on his door, and in front of dozens of witnesses. Rodolfo felt the world spin around him. His breathing was uneven, and his hands were shaking slightly. The noise of the guests in the background seemed distant. All he could see were the three boys in front of him, perfect replicas of himself when he was little. Unconcerned by the curious glances, he advanced towards Jasmine, his eyes burning with disbelief. "What does this mean, Jasmine?" His voice came out harsher than he intended. She crossed her arms, keeping her posture firm. "You know very well what it means, Rodolfo. Is this a joke?" He glanced at the boys, who were watching the scene in silence, not really understanding what was happening. "Tell me this is a lie." Jasmine tilted her head slightly, staring at him without looking away. "Why would I lie?" Rodolfo ran his hands through his hair, exasperated. His mind worked quickly, trying to find an explanation. This couldn't be real. But the boys' faces said otherwise. "This can't be true," he almost shouted. "You would have told me." Jasmine laughed humorlessly. "I tried. You and your family blocked me in every way possible. Ignored letters, cut calls, unanswered messages. You never gave me the chance to tell the truth." The guests watched everything with expressions of astonishment and muffled murmurs. Daisy, who until then had watched the scene without reacting, finally exploded. "Rodolfo, you're going to tell me what's going on now." His voice was filled with anger and despair. He turned to the bride, still bewildered. I don't know." "You don't know?" She laughed in disbelief. "Three children who are your exact replica show up in the middle of our wedding, and you don't know?" Rodolfo opened his mouth to answer, but Jasmine was quicker. "He knows, or at least he should know." Daisy put her hand to her chest, feeling her stomach churn. "Is this real, Rodolfo? Are they your children?" Rodolfo's eyes were wide. Everything in him betrayed confusion, shock, denial. But deep down, he knew the answer. And the weight of that truth fell on him like a blow. The eyes around him were fixed on the three. The guests whispered among themselves in disbelief at what they were witnessing. Daisy crossed her arms, waiting for an answer from Rodolfo, who was still in shock. Jasmine, however, did not intend to prolong that silence any longer. "Do you want to know how this happened, Daisy?" She straightened her posture, her eyes shining with indignation. "I'll tell you." Rodolfo finally turned to face her, his jaw clenched. "Jasmine, not here." "Why? Are you afraid that they'll find out the truth?" Her voice was full of pain and anger. She took a deep breath and looked directly at Daisy, who was waiting for answers. "I was pregnant, Rodolfo. I found out weeks after you left me, and the first thing I tried to do was tell you. I called countless times, but my calls were never answered. I sent messages, letters, looked for you in your office, but I was always prevented from seeing you. Your family closed all the doors to me." Rodolfo's eyes widened. "That's not possible." Jasmine laughed humorlessly. "That's not possible. I begged them to talk to you, your father, your mother, even your bodyguards, but they all said you didn't want to know about me, that you had moved on." He ran his hands through his hair, trying to process it. "I never knew that." "Of course not, because your family made sure to erase me from your life." Daisy clenched her fists. "And you gave up so easily, Jasmine. Don't give me that victim story." Jasmine's eyes burned. "I carried 3 children alone, Daisy. Without support, without help, without even the chance to have a conversation with their father. Do you have any idea what that's like?" The guests fell into absolute silence. The weight of her words hung over everyone. Rodolfo shook his head, stunned. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Jasmine stared at him firmly. "Now you know, and now what are you going to do with it?" Daisy was livid. Her face, which had previously radiated confidence, was now contorted in disbelief and anger. The guests exchanged glances, shocked by this unexpected turn of events. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, pointing at the 3 boys. "Do you expect us to believe this story without proof?" Jasmine sighed, keeping her cool. "I don't expect you to believe me just because I'm saying it. But the truth doesn't need permission to exist." Daisy crossed her arms. "So where is this evidence then?" Jasmine opened her purse and took out an envelope, handing it to Rodolfo. "Here are the medical documents from my prenatal care. My name is on it, as are the tests that prove the pregnancy. If you want something more concrete, we can do a DNA test right now." Rodolfo took the papers with trembling hands, leafing through each one. His name was nowhere to be found, but the dates matched. The tests indicated a pregnancy of triplets and were signed by a reputable doctor in Los Angeles. Daisy took a step forward. "This doesn't prove anything. It could be a coincidence, a DNA test. Yes, that would bring the truth." Jasmine raised her chin firmly. "Then let's do the test. If you and Rodolfo still have doubts, we can resolve this in the clearest way possible." Rodolfo looked up from his documents and stared at Jasmine, still stunned. He wanted to shout that it was all nonsense, but the boys' faces said otherwise. The resemblance between them was undeniable. "Do you really want to do this?" he asked, his voice wavering. Jasmine kept her gaze steady. "I have nothing to hide, but what about you, Rodolfo? Are you ready to face the truth?" The hall, once filled with music and celebration, was now plunged into a tense silence. The guests could hardly believe the turn the wedding had taken. Rodolfo clutched the medical documents in his hands, his gaze lost, while Daisy waited for his reaction. He took a deep breath and looked at the decorated altar, the white flowers, the impeccable arrangements. All of that seemed irrelevant now. He turned to Daisy, who was still anxiously waiting for his decision. "I can't go on with this now." His voice was firm but full of uncertainty. "I need to deal with this situation before I take any further steps." Daisy's eyes widened. "What are you saying, Rodolfo? Are you going to cancel our wedding because of a story with no proof?" He ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of it all. "I'm not saying I completely believe it, but if there's a chance these boys could be my sons, I need to know the truth before I move forward with anything else." The whispers grew louder among the guests. Daisy clenched her fists, furious, but she realized that insisting now would be pointless. Across the room, the 3 boys were fidgeting. Tomás looked around, confused by the commotion. Matthias bit his lip, holding his brother's hand. Leonardo, the most curious, looked directly at Rodolfo, studying him carefully. So he's our father? Matthias whispered to his mother, his eyes full of doubt. Jasmine bent down to their level and smiled, trying to calm them down. We'll have to find out for sure, my loves. But he could be. Leonardo frowned. He looks nervous. Jasmine stroked her son's hair. Because it's a surprise for him, just like it is for you. Rodolfo finally looked at the boys. For the first time, he really looked at them. The resemblance was striking. They had his features, the same inquisitive look he saw in the mirror every morning. His chest tightened. I need some time to process this. He turned to Daisy. I'm sorry, but I can't get married right now. Daisy closed her eyes, trying to contain her frustration, the wedding of her dreams crumbling before her. Without another word, she turned and walked away from the altar. The guests watched, perplexed, and there, in the middle of the room, Rodolfo found himself for the first time facing a new reality that he never imagined he would face. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Rodolfo, still stunned by the events, agreed to take the DNA tests without further discussion. He wanted answers, and deep down, a part of him already knew what was coming. The test was performed urgently, and the wait for the results seemed endless. Jasmine, for her part, remained firm. She had already raised those boys alone for years. Nothing could shake her determination now. And then, finally, the moment arrived. In the laboratory office, Rodolfo held the envelope with sweaty hands. His heart was beating fast. He looked at Jasmine, who was sitting next to her children, trying to keep her expression calm, but her intertwined fingers revealed her anxiety. With a deep sigh, he opened the envelope and began to read. The numbers and technical terms left no doubt. Tomas, Matthias, and Leonardo were his biological children. Rodolfo closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief, guilt, and shock. The boys watched him curiously, trying to understand the importance of that moment. So, Jasmine asked, her voice controlled. Rodolfo looked up and stared at her. They are my children. Tomas frowned. Does that mean we now have a father? Rodolfo felt a tightness in his chest. How could he answer that? Instead of speaking, he just nodded, and the boys exchanged unreadable looks. But before any of them could say anything else, the doctor cleared his throat and pulled out another sheet of the report. His expression became more serious. There is something else you need to know, he said, looking at Rodolfo and Jasmine. The two immediately became attentive. The test revealed a genetic marker that suggests a predisposition to an inherited heart condition. Mr. Rodolfo, do you have any history of heart problems in your family? Rodolfo frowned, thinking. My grandfather died of a heart attack when he was young, and my father has high blood pressure, but I never worried much about it. The doctor nodded. Then it makes sense. This condition can be passed on, and there is a possibility that children have inherited this risk. We need to monitor them with regular exams and, if necessary, start specialized follow-up. Jasmine felt a chill down her spine. For years, she had fought to give her children everything they could possibly need, but she never imagined that something like this was lurking. Is this serious? Her voice came out more hesitant than she would have liked. The doctor was careful in his answer. It is still too early to say anything for sure, but it is an important warning. Ideally, they should undergo a cardiology evaluation as soon as possible. Rodolfo swallowed hard. That news made something inside him change. He could no longer pretend that it did not affect him. He looked at Jasmine and, for the first time since this had all started, he saw a fear in her eyes that he had never noticed before. Fatherhood had been thrust upon him suddenly, but now it wasn't just about taking on a role. It was about protecting his children. And that, he realized, was something he couldn't ignore. The revelation about the children's heart condition brought a new layer of urgency to the situation. Rodolfo, who already felt lost, realized that he needed answers. He couldn't just accept everything without question. That same evening, he went to the family mansion. The luxurious surroundings, with their glittering chandeliers and impeccable furniture, seemed colder than ever. His father, Don Esteban, sat in his study, as usual, surrounded by books and important papers. "We need to talk," Rodolfo said, closing the door behind him. Don Esteban looked up from his newspaper and adjusted his glasses. "About what?" "About Jasmine. About my children. About the fact that you kept everything from me." Silence fell over the room. The old man sighed and took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes with his fingers. "I did what was best for you," he said finally. Rodolfo felt a wave of anger rise in his throat. "Better for me? I lived for years without knowing that I had 3 children. How can you think that was the best thing?" Don Esteban remained calm, as he always did. "You had a promising future, a planned life. Jasmine, she wasn't part of that future. If I had known about the pregnancy at that time, I would have thrown everything away." "Maybe because it was the right thing to do," Rodolfo replied, his voice thick with frustration. "You took her away from me, didn't you? She tried to find me." The patriarch hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, she tried. But we did everything necessary to make sure she couldn't." The confirmation was like a punch in the stomach. Rodolfo felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of guilt and indignation. "I could have been by her side. I could have known my children from day one. But you decided for me. You stole that from me." Don Esteban rested his hands on the table and looked his son in the eye. "You don't understand now, but one day you will. I wanted to protect you, Rodolfo. And in a way, I wanted to protect you too. Jasmine would never be part of our world." Rodolfo let out a humorless laugh. "Our world, this cold world where we manipulate people and decide what's best for them without even asking. I don't want to be part of that." Don Esteban didn't answer. He just watched as Rodolfo got up and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned around. "I've wasted too much time, but this ends here. I'm going to take responsibility for my children, whether you like it or not, and I'm going to fix what you've destroyed." Without waiting for an answer, he left the office, leaving behind a father who, for the first time, seemed to have lost control of the situation. The following days were full of intense changes for Rodolfo. After the revelation about his children and the truth behind Jasmine's separation, he realized that his marriage to Daisy no longer made sense. Their relationship was already fragile, and now, with 3 children who needed him, his priorities had completely changed. That morning, he and Daisy met in the mansion's garden. The sun illuminated the golden autumn leaves, but the atmosphere between them was cold. "So that's it?" Daisy asked, crossing her arms. "After everything, you just decide to break up?" Rodolfo sighed. "It's not easy, Daisy. But you know that I can't go on. I'm not the man you were going to marry anymore. Finding out I'm a father has changed everything." She laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Funny, you make me go through this public humiliation, and now you want to go out like a hero." "I don't want to be a hero for anything," he countered, "but I need to be there for my children. I have a lot to make up for. And it would be unfair to you to continue something that no longer makes sense." Daisy was silent for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and fixed Rodolfo with a firm look. "I knew this was going to happen from the moment I saw those kids. At the wedding. Good luck, Rodolfo. You're going to need it." She turned and walked away without looking back. In the days that followed, Rodolfo threw himself headlong into his new life as a father. For the first time, he wasn't focused on business or status, but on the little things in everyday life. He started spending more time with Thomas, Matthias, and Leonardo, getting to know them. At first, the boys were insecure, unsure if they could trust him, but little by little Rodolfo started to win over them. During the first week, he took them to a park where they played ball and ran around together. The twins, full of energy, had the time of their lives. In a moment of carelessness, Matthias tripped and scraped his knee. Before Jasmine could intervene, Rodolfo knelt down beside his son and blew on the wound. "It's okay, champ. We'll clean this up and you'll be running again soon," he said with a smile. Matthias looked at him, surprised. He had never seen his father act like this before. With a small smile, he held Rodolfo's hand as he helped him up. At night, he helped Jasmine put the boys to bed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he told stories, and before he knew it, the three of them were already asleep, hugging him. Jasmine watched everything from the doorway, moved. The man who had abandoned her before was now there, trying to be a father, and in that moment, Rodolfo knew that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he should be. The months went by, and Rodolfo's presence in his children's lives became something natural. At first, the twins still called him only by his name, keeping a certain distance, but over time, as he made himself present in the small and big things of their daily lives, this barrier began to disappear. One afternoon, while they were playing, in Jasmine's backyard, Tomas fell off his bike. Rodolfo ran to help him, picking him up and checking for any injuries. "Is everything okay, champ?" he asked with concern. Tomas sniffed, holding back tears, but then he looked at Rodolfo and, without thinking much, answered, "Yes, Dad." Rodolfo's heart sank. It was the first time one of them had called him that. The sound of that simple word meant much more than any fortune he had ever accumulated. From that moment on, everything changed. Little by little, Matthias and Leonardo also began to call him Dad without hesitation. Rodolfo started taking them to school, helping them with their homework, and getting emotional with each of their achievements. At the same time, the media, which had previously followed the scandal closely, lost interest. With no public fights or twists and turns, the case was no longer a topic of conversation. Rodolfo didn't care. For the first time, the opinions of others didn't matter. He didn't have to prove anything to anyone other than his children and Jasmine, and surprisingly, he realized that he was happier than he had ever been. What had once been a life of appearances and luxury had now become something real, a family. Jasmine spent sleepless nights pondering the future. Ever since the tests revealed the boys' hereditary heart condition, her priority became ensuring that they received the best possible medical care. In New York, the resources were infinitely superior, with renowned specialists and hospitals equipped to offer the necessary support. Sitting on the balcony of her apartment, she watched the city lights twinkle on the horizon. The children were sleeping in the next room, and Rodolfo, who was increasingly present, had just left after another day with them. "Maybe this is the best decision," she muttered to herself. The next morning, she met Rodolfo to talk. They had coffee together, something that had recently become a routine. "I'm thinking about staying in New York," she said, watching his reaction closely. He looked up from his cup, surprised. "Are you sure? The boys need constant medical care. Here, they'll have the best care, and you'll be close by, too." A significant silence hung in the air. Rodolfo took a deep breath, absorbing each word. Finally, after years of being away, he would have the opportunity to be a present father, something he had never imagined before. "If that means I'll be able to be with them every day, then I'm all for it," he said sincerely. Jasmine smiled slightly. For the first time, she felt that he had truly changed. The time for secrets and resentment was over. Now, each of them was ready to start over, without resentment, without illusions, just focused on what really mattered, the well-being of their children. Life was no longer about what had been lost, but about what could be built from then on. The years passed, and life found its balance. Jasmine and Rodolfo became great friends, united by their unconditional love for their children. Although they never intended to get back together, their daily life brought them closer in a different way, based on respect and partnership. One of their biggest concerns had always been the twins' heart condition, but to everyone's relief, the regular checkups brought good news. The disease had not progressed, and the doctors assured them that with proper monitoring, the boys could lead a normal life without major risks. Upon receiving the news, Jasmine and Rodolfo looked at each other, moved. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from their shoulders. "Now we can breathe a sigh of relief," said Jasmine, holding Rodolfo's hand briefly. "Yes, and make sure they have the best childhood possible," he replied, smiling. With this certainty, each went their own way, but always maintaining the complicity they had developed over the years. Rodolfo became a present father, closely following each stage of his children's lives, while Jasmine remained independent, but knowing that she could always count on him. At family gatherings, at the kids' soccer games, and in the simple moments of everyday life, they learned that love didn't have to be romantic to be true. The respect, friendship, and partnership they built ensured that their children grew up surrounded by affection and stability. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was a real story, with a happy ending in the right way. No hurt feelings, no resentment, just a family united by what really mattered, and that was the moving story of overcoming and reunion. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more engaging stories like this. Your support is very important for us to continue bringing incredible content. Turn on the bell so you don't miss any news and share this story with someone who will also be moved. See you in the next video.